Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, 𝗥𝗲𝘆 𝗣𝗀. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations.
Episode 322. Quiet does not mean silent. It seems that I need to come back to this myth many times over, as there are always those trying to silence we introverts. And annoyingly, some of them claim to be introverts themselves. Just this week, I saw a post in an introvert group proudly proclaiming all the things we couldn't and shouldn't do. I'm pretty sure you know what my response to that was. All together now, poppycock! I will admit to being baffled by how many so-called introverts seem intent on clipping our wings rather than enabling us to fly, but there's no accounting for some. My assumption is that because they lack the confidence and the skills to partake fully in this precious life, they want others to think this is normal and join them. Admittedly, that is my assumption, so only one interpretation. But what really bothers me is the impact of their behaviour. Either they are not aware that behaviours and emotions are contagious, or are very well aware and are being manipulative. Folks, that is a form of bias, most likely affinity bias, and it's usually used to exclude us in cultures that favour the extrovert ideal. So it's fascinating to witness it being used in this way. With the help of a brilliant colleague, I now have a new term for those type of introverts, but I'll not share it until the end of this episode. Anyway, this episode is not about the bias or those people per se, but it is about what happens when we subscribe to the myth that real introverts, I hope you detected my use of air quotes when I said real just then, real introverts are neither seen nor heard. I encourage you to cancel your subscription to that myth right this minute, because if you take it on wholesale, you are harming your well-being, your relationships, and your career prospects. Take it from someone who knows. So if silence isn't always the best option, what are we to do as introverts? I'm truly grateful for my extensive training as a facilitator, coach, and management trainer, as the skills I have acquired and honed over the decades have enabled me to reach way more of my potential than I would have believed possible in my teenage years. I have learned and mastered, to all accounts, when to interject or intervene, and how these are so different from interrupting. These skills have enabled me to be braver in many situations, especially when I notice others clearly frustrated in a meeting or conversation but not knowing what to say or do. So I thought it might be useful to share my thoughts on this with you, as I believe it will help you find your voice when you might need it the most. When we think of what to do rather than stay silent, I've realised that the key difference is down to intent and impact. When we interrupt, the intent is to stop someone or some people in mid-flow to make our point, which is usually contrary to the one they are making. The impact can be a bit brutal and considered rude. It can easily become a battle of wills, a point-scoring power play, so that there is a winner of sorts. This is the reason many of us prefer not to interrupt. We can do without the conflict. Now, there are plenty of times when I have found myself holding back from interrupting when someone who seems to love the sound of their own voice is droning on incessantly, which merely blocks others from having any meaningful conversation. I've witnessed others be not so restrained, and it's a slippery slope to nowhere of consequence. Add to that, most decent people consider interrupting to be rude, which it mostly is. And many of we introverts will steer clear and remain silent, probably rolling our eyes or dying slightly inside. My friends, we have other, dare I say, better options available to us that I want to remind you of here so you add them back into your communication skills toolkit. In my mind, the real art lies in the interjections that encourage progress and the interventions that momentarily halt the conversation as people have a genuine, wait, what? Moment before they make a conscious choice about how to proceed. So let's shift our focus first to the interjection. And I have to say, never underestimate the usefulness of an interjection as a way of we introverts getting our voice into the room. The intention here is to make it clear that you are an integral part of the conversation, even though you may not be the main contributor. This is done by expressing supportive or encouraging comments or sounds. Things like, I agree, that gets my vote, great point. Even though the value of what you're saying is minimal, the impact, because encouraging, usually keeps things moving along productively. But more than that, it tends to bolster your confidence as you hear yourself contributing. Getting your voice into the room is always so important. You may have heard me refer to using a placeholder when you want to say something but haven't quite formed the words in your mind yet, and that is a very useful form of interjection. Now let's move on to the type that takes the most skill in my experience, the intervention, and it's a skill so well worth mastering. The intention of this is to invite or offer a change to the course of the dialogue or action, not for the benefit of the person who intervenes, but for the benefit of the whole group or situation. It's an invitation, not an instruction. It's delivered with the authority of one who has been observing the process, even from within, but not as a directive. The final decision remains with the group, and they are now in a position to make an informed choice. So it needs handling with care and is not the sort of thing to jump in with before thinking it through. This, in my opinion, is why introverts tend to be naturally skilled at the intervention. But it does require confidence and a clarity of intention. In fact, that intention may well be part of the pre-frame used at or near the start of the intervention. Things like, in order for us to focus back on the main objective of this conversation, or, I've noticed there seem to be two distinct schools of thought here, or, what is the most important thing to address right now? A great intervention often starts with a neat observation that has people stop and think for the right reasons. The beauty and challenge of the intervention is that it's not about waiting for permission, and you don't have to be the assigned facilitator to use it effectively. You simply observe and judge when the time is right, and then you speak up. And interventions don't start with an apology. How often have I heard someone say, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but," by which time the impact is lost. One of the things I'm often given feedback on is that although I don't say much, what I do say has value and a positive impact. I'll take that, and that's what I want for all of us. You may have already noticed that when you contribute with intention, your impact is more profound. And that certainly enhances your credibility. Less silence or pressure to prattle or tittle-tattle, and more meaningful contributions. Let's not fall into the trap of measuring the number of contributions any of us make, and focus instead on the value, insight, or challenge they provide. Now, I can't finish an episode that has silent in the title without talking about silence and the power it yields. This is one of the other skills I learned during my training and have refined my use of it over years of experience. Judging when staying silent is not just chickening out and avoidant, but the right intervention is a real art. And if you don't believe that saying nothing is an intervention in its own right, I invite you to reconsider. But there is another side to this coin. How often do people, especially those who lack confidence or feel threatened, be they introverts or not, choose silence as the easy option? Silence is not something we're typically afraid of as introverts, although we don't always use it for the right reason. And again, it's something many of us are pretty skilled at, but there is a huge difference between being silent and holding silence. Being silent is all too often a cop-out where the intention is to stay safe and remain invisible. The gaze is usually lowered and our focus turns inward. Holding silence is altogether different. Eye contact is maintained, albeit softly, and our focus is out there with the group or the individual we are with. It takes a particular energy to hold silence like this, and it's one of the most beautiful things I have ever experienced. Holding silence asks more of us than speaking ever will. It asks us to stay present when it would be easier to retreat, to remain engaged without filling the space, and to trust that something useful is still unfolding even when nothing is being said. So there are 3 distinct skills you can use to build your credibility without ever having to go near interrupting. They are interjecting when you want to encourage or stay in the conversation, intervening when you observe that a change of course may be beneficial, and holding silence so that people can do their own processing in a safe space. And they are all such valuable techniques for you to refine. They will serve you well in the workplace, in social situations, and with those you love. My invitation to you is to stop thinking that interrupting is the only way to be heard, to stop self-silencing thinking it's polite, and to use more appropriate methods instead. If you're waiting for the right moment or for someone to give you the floor, give yourself that permission. You're more than capable. We're not here to be polite. We're here to make quiet impact. Oh, before I forget, that term I've invented for the types of introverts who seem to want to hold us back? 𝗞𝗲𝘆 𝗣liche. For me, and interestingly my team too, this represents someone who is a covert narcissist, afraid of showing vulnerability, lacking self-esteem, and manipulative in their behaviour. Yet the label they choose to hide behind is the introvert label. As a 𝗞𝗲𝘆 their manipulation is with a view to keeping us playing small like them, by constantly telling us what we can't do, so we believe we are less capable simply because we are introverts. What a load of bunkum. Pity the poor 𝗞𝗲𝘆. They speak from a place of confidence poverty, and that's not where flourishing introverts are.
If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.